Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Gostola, managing editor for Shadowproof, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Ella Fassler, who is a journalist. She's contributed work to Nation, Truthout, and also Shadowproof. We have a story from her right now that covers Alabama prisoners who have faced solitary confinement and violence for organizing a boycott and work stoppage. And so I'd like to just take a moment to put that up on the screen for all of you so you can see what we're referring to today. And this is the article that she did some tremendous work on, and we're really grateful to have you joining. So hello to you, Ella.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And I'd like to, I'll pull this down so we can see. And so the people who are unfamiliar with this story, I think it's probably good to start with the basics. You were looking at a latest action that was planned by prisoners within the Free Alabama movement. Could you tell us what the Free Alabama movement is, but then also why they were planning this boycott and strike at Kilby Correctional Facility in Alabama?
Mm-hmm. So the Free Alabama movement is a group of incarcerated organizers who work alongside organizers from the outside, from all around the country, mostly Alabama, but elsewhere too. People may know them from the 2016 work strike. They were really heavily involved in that alongside IWOC, the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, which was called one of the largest prison work strikes, I think, in the history of this country. Although it's always hard to tell because prisons are always, the prison officials are always saying no one's on strike. Then incarcerated people say otherwise. So this most recent work strike and boycott was called for New Year's to start the year off right. And it was actually supposed to be for the entire state. And they called it because, well, one, for boycott, commissary items are incredibly expensive because the government has monopoly contracts with companies. So the companies can charge like whatever they want, basically. So phone calls are really expensive. Just everyday items are, astronomical. So people called to boycott those items. And it's just kind of ridiculous because, the prisoners don't make money. So it like kind of the burden falls on, the burden falls on the lower income families. And then also the Alabama, the state of Alabama owns Alabama Correctional Industries, which is like basically a slave plantation, and they pay people a quarter to 75 cents per hour to make things like furniture and clothing and barbecue grills and stuff like that. So the prisoners called for a strike to protest slavery and to demand fair wages. And then at least 11 people in solitary confinement at Kilby went on hunger strike because they couldn't go on labor strike.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And two of these people who are one I know has been part of this struggle for a long time, Kinetic Justice. He's a prisoner organizer. I think he does some jailhouse lawyering too, who has received coverage, who's been out there. Could you say a little bit about him and what happened to Kinetic Justice?
So actually for this story, it was my first time talking with Kinetic, I think because he's been in solitary confinement so much. So I've more so been in touch with Swift over the past few years.
Right. And then there's the other prisoner, Swift Justice, who you highlight in your story. Yeah. You can talk about both of them. You don't have to keep it separate.
They're the dynamic duo. They're probably two of the people that are most responsible for the Department of Justice investigating and then suing Alabama. Kinetic kind of like blew the cover on this gambling ring at Limestone Correctional Facility. So I guess like the guards were part of this gambling ring with the incarcerated people. I think Shadowproof covered this. I didn't.
Right. Well, Brian Sonnenstein, who's my colleague, he's covered it very closely, and so just for people who want additional background, I'm not asking you to go into it, but just to encourage people if they want to see some of the story that has unfolded over the last few years, you can find that at Shadowproof. But anyways, continue. I didn't mean to stop you.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine. So yeah, Kinetic and Swift are always just like blowing the whistle on what's going on, and then the prison will transfer them somewhere else, and then they'll uncover something at the next person that they're sent to. So unfortunately, Swift Justice right now, who's one of the key organizers in this most recent call for the boycott and worker strike, is being retaliated against. They threw him in solitary confinement, and he hasn't eaten for 20 days now. So he joined the hunger strike once they put him in solitary confinement. And we haven't heard from him for about a week now, unfortunately. So we're not really sure what the status is there. But like, yeah, Swift's been really responsible for whistleblowing at Limestone Correctional as well. So there was this thing called bucket detail, which you might have heard about. But I covered this for Truthout. They used to shackle incarcerated people to buckets and like force them to defecate in buckets for days on end. And once he like blew the whistle on that and we wrote the story, they stopped doing that. So that's one win. So those guys like always have a lot of energy, and I don't know how they do it, but I have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah, and so one thing that we wanted to make sure we covered specifically was this aspect of the solitary confinement, and the fact that as you're saying here, you told people that, or you cover how Kinetic has spoken out against this gambling and exposed contraband rings by the staff. So he's kind of a whistleblower, and he is somebody who's taking a risk. He speaks to the media, and he also does jailhouse lawyering, which we know is something that prison authorities often do not like. So if you could talk about this aspect where solitary is being used to silence a person, and anything you want to add on how this is a practice that authorities will use in these facilities.
Yeah. Solitary confinement is something that was controversial like over a century ago in this country. So that kind of shakes up the idea that we've totally progressed as a society, because it wasn't really something that was done even, a century ago. And now today, the United States on any given day has about 100,000 people in solitary confinement. So that means they're in a cell, very tiny cell, for 22, 23 hours a day. They might be let out for a little bit of rec time, which means that they're put in a like dog cage, basically, something like an oversized dog cage outside, and then they can work out in there. But otherwise, they're just locked in their cell. So yeah, it's used to punish people that file grievances, lawsuits, or people that speak to the media. And like the UN considers it torture. A lot of countries don't even lock people up in solitary confinement, or if they do, not for more than a day or two, because it's been shown that you can have irreversible brain damage if you're in solitary for more than like 2 days, 3 days. So yeah, it's definitely like a really nasty tool in their toolbox for punishing people who call them out.
Right. And that's in addition to already having ways that it makes it difficult for you and me as journalists to do our job and talk to prisoners, because you have restrictions on who you can contact, and they'll impose restrictions on the kind of mail you can receive from people, and who you can contact, right?
Yeah, and even I guess with Swift this time around, they've moved people into like ultra solitary. So Swift is even more isolated than normal people in solitary. So that just like hampers the movement for striking for the boycott, because they just try to isolate sort of the leaders of the movement in that way. So it's a way that they can crack down on strikes.
Now, before we would wrap up here, I wanted to ask you about this other story that you did a couple of years ago that is now topical. Not that it wasn't when Donald Trump was president, but because of the action of the Biden administration, we are seeing that there is a lot of conversation about banning private prison companies. The Justice Department is saying they're not going to have these private prison contracts. And yet, as you covered, and maybe just a handful of other journalists have covered, but I think there were some with maybe the Appeal or ProPublica or other places that have looked at this. And I think the American Prospect had a pretty good article as well. Just looking at how there's ways around for private prison companies if they want to keep making money and if they want to continue this. So, can you say a little about how we should view this action from the Biden administration given your prior reporting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as many people have pointed out, privately owned federal prisons constitute a very small fraction of actual people that are incarcerated in this country. So about 14,000 people. And we have maybe 2.5 million incarcerated. So, and I haven't seen any indication that those people are going to be released. So that would be a pretty big deal. If there's 14,000 people released, that would be awesome. But I haven't seen that indication. So it seems like it's just going to be sort of a transfer of hands, is how I understand it. So yeah, I think it's just sort of a symbolic action that makes it seem like they're doing something real. So for my article for Truthout, private prison companies have known this is a long time coming, so they've prepared. They have a diversified portfolio at this point. So what they're doing now is seeing that some governments want to build new prisons, and so instead of actually managing the prisons, they're constructing them and then basically become landlords for the government, right? So the government signs a contract with a private prison company, and for decades and decades, and the government has to pay them. And it ends up being much more expensive for the taxpayer anyway. And governments do this because there's such big deficits. So it sort of allows them to tell taxpayers oh, we're going to build this new prison, but it's not going to be too expensive right now. But then in the long run, it becomes more expensive anyway. So they're considering these public-private contracts in Alabama, actually. I think it's a $1 billion contract. So CoreCivic and GEO Group are definitely two companies that are possibly going to be constructing these prisons, and they just won't be the ones managing it. The federal government or the state government will.
And if I'm right, and I know you probably followed this order that Biden issued is almost identical to what Obama did in the final year or 2 years of his presidency, right? The Justice Department had put out a very similar ban. So this doesn't really move the needle on policy against prisons, right?
Yeah. I wasn't as involved around that time because I was still pretty young, but you're probably right. That's the sense I'm getting, is that it sounds good, sort of, because it's a big issue for liberals. The big thing is the private prisons. So I think it'll placate some people, but we need to understand that there's still 2.5 million people incarcerated, the highest rate in the entire world, and it's not going to make a dent on that.
But the big thing is that this doesn't affect Homeland Security and ICE and the detention centers and and that's where a huge chunk of the profits are, and the Justice Department isn't doing anything about that. I don't know if they can, but it's probably in another agency's domain to have to deal with that. But still, it's important for people to know that this isn't going to make it easier for those who have been detained and held in mass for the last several years. Ella, thank you very much for talking with me about these important issues, these important stories. Would you like to tell people where they could find your work? And I'm willing to let you tell people where they can go to donate and support you. Would you like to subscribe to your newsletter?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. People can find me on Twitter at Ella Fassler. And I do have a Substack newsletter. I'm not even sure how people would really find it. I'm not super active. You could Google me and then Substack, and you'd find it there. Also, the Free Alabama movement has a fundraiser because they're trying to get a lawyer for this most recent round of retaliation. So maybe we can link that if there's show notes. The Fight Toxic Prisons has started that for them. I think they are actually about to get a lawyer really soon. So that'll help cover legal fees. And they have a call-in campaign that's kind of scattered all over the internet. You can always email Jefferson Dunn, who's the commissioner of Alabama, jefferson.dunn@docalabama.gov.
All right. Well, this video will archive on our Shadowproof YouTube account, and after that's done, we'll share it around, and we'll make sure that people know that if they'd like to, they can go support you as well as this fundraiser. So thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch, Ella. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.